Cue the sparkly noises and forced awkward interactions. It's time to write a romantic subplot. Salutations, I'm Becca and this is Words Another Malarkey, and today we are going to talk about romantic subplots. Now, I love romance just as much as the next girl. Well, actually, it really depends. I've met girls that don't like romance, but me personally, I'm super cheeseball and I absolutely love it. I love reading it. Romance propels me through a story, generally, when it's done right, because as we also know, romance and romantic subplots tend to get shoehorned into everything we read and watch, and sometimes, a lot of the time, they have no business being there. I mean, we can all think of examples when it hasn't worked, and we can think of examples when it has. I think I watched The Office not just for the comedy, but for the Jim and Pam romantic subplot. I think a lot of us did, and that's just one example. So I'm going to go through 5 tips for writing swoon-worthy romantic subplots. And these are just coming from my own reading and writing and researching experience. So there's probably lots of other tips that you can implement. And if you have any good ones, feel free to leave them in the comments. These are the 5 things that I've found that really, to me, make or break a good romantic subplot. Number 1, develop your characters. It pretty much goes without saying, right? I mean, like, you want to develop your characters anyway, but specifically when you're working in a story that, you know, maybe the focus isn't romance, you have a science fiction setting, you have a fantasy, dystopian setting, whatever, but you want romance incorporated, you gotta have some well-rounded characters. You have to show them being a person, being an individual outside of their interactions with romantic entanglements and whatnot. So when you really focus on who are these characters, what do they want, what are their goals, and how do those goals clash with each other, or how do those goals complement each other, you know, you start to really develop a blueprint for a really great romantic subplot, especially if, you know, you have characters that clash, their goals clash, or their values clash, because then they can learn something from each other. Same goes if their values actually really complement each other, then they can get along, you know, they have something in common. So think about that, think about how that interplay of characteristics is going to influence the eventual romance that will blossom. Tip number 2 is give both characters something to do. So here's kind of the rationale behind this one. I think most of us are past, in this day and age, the whole like damsel in distress trope. I mean, we still see it from time to time, but no one really likes it that much. I think it's just because it's a huge cliche, and we also are like, we want to see women and characters in general doing things. So it definitely isn't as much of a problem now, but you can still fall into the trap of giving one character like all the autonomy and the other is just kind of in the background and is just there to be a romantic interest. Make sure that both characters are doing something, that there's not one character that is just defined by the label romantic love interest, right? Like maybe they're on the opposing side, you know, everybody loves enemies to lovers, but you don't have to do that, obviously. Or maybe they are working together, but they have separate jobs, and they don't have to have equal roles. You know, if you have one that's the main character and the other that's kind of like the secondary main character, then one's gonna get more screen time, so to speak, than the other. But, you know, really do make them involved. Get the other person involved and make that integrated into the plot. I mean, romantic subplots should always be integrated into the plot, but it really helps and makes it easier when you're very clear on the roles that your characters have within the story. And they can change as you go along, you know. You have one character who starts out as the enemy of the other, and then they start switching sides, you know, everybody loves that. Or you have the 2 characters working together and one goes off on another path because they get, you know, tricked or deceived or whatever, discouraged. You know, one starts out not having a big role, but because of them becoming involved with the other, they find that they really do have a part to play in the narrative. So, there's like endless options, and I'm being really vague on purpose because it's really hard to like just put this into real concrete terms. I should probably give an example. My big example for romantic subplot, arguably it's also a romance, is Defy the Stars, that series by Claudia Gray, because it's just such a beautifully interwoven romance. The overarching plot is not romantic. It's more about like the main character getting home and saving her home planet, but in the process it's enemies to lovers, and it starts out with this android boy. She has to team up with him and she hates him, and he doesn't like her very much, but they're forced to work together, and then they start to develop like a mutual respect, etc., until you get to the end and they have developed a really close connection. It's beautiful. I'm still in the second one right now, so we're getting even deeper into it, but the point is they both have things to do and their roles do change as you get further into the story. Okay, number 3 is don't drag it on forever. I think more than anything, think about your pacing, because we all know how annoying it is. Well, there's 2 extremes, right? There's the jump right in, instant love at first sight, hot and heavy romance, and then where do you go from there? If it's a subplot, it should really build along with the plot, right? So the other extreme is to just drag it on forever and never actually deliver on the promise. If you're going to set up a romance, if that's going to be part of your story, you are making a promise to your reader, aside from the main plot, that you are going to get these 2 characters together. They might not know it at first, but the signs are going to be there in the beginning, right? Even if it's enemies to lovers. So deliver on that promise. Even if you're in a series, right? Maybe they don't confess their love to each other in the first book, but they share a kiss, And then in the second book, things get deeper. Don't just keep doing the almost but not quite, like the trope where they're about to kiss and somebody interrupts them. That's cool once or twice, I feel like. But when you do it over and over and over again, you start to tire out your reader. And, eventually they gotta do something, They gotta do something. So figure out when that is, and there's really no, magical number or sweet spot. I think each story is different, but it's not going to be too early in the book, and it probably shouldn't be on the very last page. Again, I'm being vague on purpose because there's so many variations, but the principle is there. Deliver on the promise. Don't just keep everybody hanging, or you're going to frustrate everyone, including your characters. Number 4 is conflict is okay. Okay. I think we kind of know this because we're all used to the romance genre and how typical it is for there to be some kind of fight or some kind of point of contention that threatens the romantic development of the 2 characters, and then they get back together and realize that they love each other in the end. It's a little more subtle with a romantic subplot because romance isn't your main focus. There's still conflict, story-related conflict going on. You don't want the romantic conflict to overshadow your story conflict, so it can be directly in relation to your story conflict, or it can be its own separate thing. That's why it's called a subplot, right? So, but you want to have some tension, because if it's just flowers and butterflies all the time, then there's no stakes and there's no suspense, and the reader is like, okay, well, I guess they're in love or whatever. So you do want something there. It just really depends. Again, this doesn't apply exclusively to enemies to lovers. Even if the 2 characters really get along and really love each other a lot, there's still probably going to be something that comes up that tests their feelings for each other, right? And again, this can be directly related to the plot. It's great if it is, because then everything's real integrated, or it can be something kind of separate or tandem because you have character arcs going on too. I think the main thing is that you just don't want the reader to question the integrity of the match. If they're fighting all the time, you're not going to be very convinced that these 2 are in love or are really good together. You don't want a problematic relationship. They can start out problematic, but it's got to get better as you go along. They got to work through things. So if they're constantly fighting, you probably have a problem. But if they're never fighting, then it's probably going to be kind of boring. So really think about that. Really think about how it plays into your plot too, because that can really make it easy to find those points of contention. And last but not least, number 5, that is, do you need it? Now, once again, I would prefer romance to not romance, but I would rather have no romance than bad romance. Yes. So if you're going to put it in, if you want to write a story that incorporates romance, and there's nothing wrong with that, then don't just shove it in there like last minute or without thinking about everything I just said and everything that you know about good romances. Like, integrate it. Think about how it really enhances the plot and enhances the characters, right? It's not just that they're gonna be romantic partners for the sake of it. It's gotta really do something for the plot or for the characters. And that can be, oh my gosh, any number of things. One character has trust issues. One character, had a really bad breakup and thought they couldn't love again. I guess that's the same as trust issues, not really. One thought that they were just focused on the singular goal of the plot and that love was, irrelevant or whatever. Or that they weren't looking for a relationship, but it found them. I don't know, so many things. But again, it really just comes down to making sure it makes sense with the plot and that it makes sense with your story and that it isn't just there for the sake of being there. So, can I help you? Is there something I can do for you? Oh, jaboopy. So, in conclusion, writing romantic subplots is totally awesome, and I am in full support of it. But it's not like you have to. It's not a necessity. And if you don't want to, don't. Don't feel like you have to, I don't know, for the market value or whatever. There's so many good stories that don't have any romance. I love family related, other kinds of relationship related arcs, like, you have like sibling stuff or like friendship's great, there's, or, mother and child, father and child. The Mandalorian is a great example. There's like some little romantic subplot, tiny little things, but like it's not even really there right now. So from what I remember, because I watched the series like a long time ago. But the main relationship being built is between Mandalorian and Baby Yoda, which is basically, equated to father and son, right? Father and adopted son. And it's wonderful. And I would probably think less of it if they just like shoved romance in there all the time. So I think you get it. It's not necessary, but if you want to do it, do it. It's awesome also. And if you're going to do it, really think about how and why and what and who and when and where and what the heck. So, until next time, keep it weird. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. I suppose, I've got a candle here, so you're going to want to subscribe for that because candles. And yeah, so we'll see you next time. I'm gonna redo that. Plus my dog's scratching herself, so she's making a bunch of noise. You literally are the worst because you make the most noise as close to the camera as you possibly can. Okay, love you too.